Welcome to the Eagle Eye Podcast, the #1 show to bring you all things Club America in English. Let's start the show.
Hey everybody, welcome back to a special edition of the Eagle Eye Podcast. Changing up a little bit, I'll be your host, Dylan Jimenez, and joining with me is our good friend in California, Ivan Pineda. Ivan, how you doing today?
Very good, man. Very, very good. Excited to talk a little bit more on this topic that we're going to be discussing here, and just excited.
No, I definitely agree with you too. It's going to be a very interesting topic and discussion we're going to have. And joining us too is Rigo. Rigo, how you doing today, man?
Pretty good, man. Thanks for asking. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be on this podcast for the first time and give my opinion.
No, man, we appreciate you coming on, taking the time out. Probably a bit busy, man. But, we'll just kind of get right into it. After the game, the Clasico, we saw a couple of the America players and Chivas players, swap jerseys. Rigo, correct me if I'm wrong. I saw Antuna there, but who were the rest of the players that were there after this?
I saw Antuna, Peralta, and in another angle, I saw Pollo Briseño talking too. And I know for a fact that one of the players that swapped jerseys was Ronaldo Cisneros because one of the America players had his jersey. So I know those players were involved for sure.
Right. And Ivan, just to kind of, clarify for us too, we saw Cordova there. We saw was Sanchez there too, correct? And then we saw also too, yeah.
So we saw him. We also saw Escobosa there. It was a handful of America players as well, and really interesting of what happened, or at least what was caught on camera, because I'm pretty sure it's not been the only time that this ever has occurred.
No, yeah, definitely too. And after the game, very, I guess you would say controversial. A lot of people, kind of going back and forth that were against this. Some people, just kind of not kind of turned the eye a little bit. We're okay with it. But gentlemen, I just kind of want to get your opening thoughts. And Rigo, I'll throw it to you first. Being the guest on the show. But you see the players, mingling with each other on the pitch. You see some of them, swap jerseys. Just kind of what are your thoughts, with all of this?
Well, I'm incredibly annoyed seeing that because I know that these players, they're friendly with each other. They don't hate each other, and I don't expect them to even hate each other or start fighting. But the least you can do, at least as a Chivas player, after such a terrible display, is just go into the locker room. We don't want to see, as a Chivas fan, you don't want to see your players laughing directly after a loss. It's embarrassing to me, and that's the part that really irritates me the most, is that they didn't care. They were just there in the field talking, laughing. They didn't even care to hide it at all. And it's just further embarrassment as a Chivas fan.
Okay. And Ivan, for you, I know for you, diehard America fan, Rigo too as well, diehard Chivas fan. But Ivan, just you're seeing America, swapping some of the America players swapping jerseys with the Chivas players, and then correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you saw Cordova, with one of the jerseys just kind of around his neck too. I mean, what are you kind of feeling? What are your thoughts? Whenever you first see that.
I think you have to consider a little bit of what Rigo was saying, and you kind of have to put yourself in their shoes, because if America was to lose this game, if the coin was flipped on our end, I think with the sentiment that we were feeling at the moment, we were sky high. We had just won the Clasico. So maybe, at the time, me seeing that, I wasn't too bothered by it, and I'll get to a little bit further as to why. But I think Rigo makes a point there. I think if America would have not gotten all 3 points in that game, maybe we would be saying in Rigo's shoes, and saying that it's a super appalling thing to do. That that should not be the way that things should be handled. But I think since America was kind of poised in a position where we do win this game, I think now you have to look at it and say, okay, let's take away from the aspect that we won. Is it right? Is it wrong? And I think I think we all share here on the podcast kind of the similar opinion that, granted, like Rigo said, they're friends off the pitch, and we don't expect them to be rivals, and we expect them to be competitive during the 90 minutes, and afterwards you want to have a laugh, then okay, do it. But there's there's a way to do it, and in I think in the tunnel where there's not that many cameras, that definitely would have been a much better suited way to go about it. I think the players just kind of felt a little bit more at ease since there was no fans, and they probably thought there wasn't that big of an eye on them. So I think maybe that's why we saw what we saw. But going back to what you mentioned, seeing Cordova kind of being very chillax, having the jersey around his neck, you know, and I told you this, Dylan, when we were speaking off camera, and the way I'm gonna put it, it's gonna maybe come off wrong. I don't want it to come off this way, but it didn't really faze me as much because, to me, the players that were associated in this kind of situation were just players in my eyes. Because if you're talking about a Cuauhtémoc Blanco or Ochoa or a Pablo Pardo doing these kind of situations, doing these things, then I think all hell breaks loose, because I think you don't want to see legends associated with that kind of action. At the end of the day, these players haven't kind of made the mark of being legends in the club. Yes, they might be important players, but at the moment, they don't stand in that quota of legends. So for me, I think, okay, it's fine. I don't think they handled it appropriate. I think there was a time and a place to go about it, but I'm definitely not over here, demanding a citation or anything in regards to the behavior that was at least displayed by some of the America players.
No, yeah, no, I get what you're saying, and we lost Rigo there for a second, but I see him coming back now. Let me add him back. Rigo, everything good, man?
Yeah, sorry about that.
No problem at all. Ivan, I'll keep it with you though. You kind of mentioned, some of the legends of the institution, like Cuauhtémoc Blanco, Ochoa, but you look at Cordova, he's a cantero and same with Ochoa. But I remember, I'm not quoting you directly, but I remember you told me one time too that just going through the system, you're kind of brought up, and you learn about these rivalries, and you're kind of basically known to hate the institution of Chivas, that's your rival. But does it still not face to you in a sense, since Cordova, just going through the system, coming from the academy, and just still seeing him with that jersey around his neck, just being able to swap his?
It does, because I think at the end of the day, this whole discussion that we're having is going to go down, and it's going to really fall down into personal opinion, personal beliefs. Like, for me, yeah, I was a little bit like, well, that's weird, but I'm not too bothered by it either. It's just like, okay, I mean, they're having a laugh, they could swap jerseys, it is what it is. But like I've told you, Dylan, growing up in an institution, and I mean, it really speaks more about a player, that the fact that they come through your cantera and they still go out and swap jerseys with your eternal rivals open in the camera like that. I mean, it might have, some other players may have done it, down in the tunnel. We may never know that story, but we know about this one because, of course, it was captured out in the open. But yes, it is a little bit of phasing, because you're instilled at such a young age that you must hate the institution, that you should never be associated with them, and that as long as both clubs live on, that there's always going to be that rivalry. And it is a little bit degrading from a fan's perspective to see that some of these players don't really grasp that, or maybe at the moment didn't really realize that 90 minutes may be over, but you still carry that weight of the institution, that those kind of morals and stuff like that. So yeah, it is a bit peculiar.
No, go ahead, Rigo. Yeah,
I think that the biggest factor here is the performance of the game, like the context. And the context was that America won, and Chivas couldn't even complete any passes towards the last 20 minutes of that game. We couldn't even complete passes. We were losing the ball ridiculously. The efforts that were made were very, again, ridiculous. And then at the end of the game, you're feeling this frustration as a Chivas fan, because it's 3 years that we haven't been able to beat America. It's 3 years that we haven't been in Liguilla. So if I were an America fan, I don't think I would be as mad. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't even really care about this that much. The main issue for me is that, to me, America is still a rival. to me, I still want to beat them, and I haven't beat them in 3 years. I don't know if these players see it that way anymore. Honestly, I ask myself, do they even care about this rivalry anymore? Do America players care? Why should they? They always beat us. We aren't really competition. Should Chivas players be amped up for this game if they're always they already have this inferiority complex, I feel, because even though I expected a Chivas loss and I predicted an America 1-0 win, I actually, in my prediction, I said that America would have to set up a low block, that they would have to defend lower, because I thought my players would have at least the ability to put some pressure on America, but they didn't even do that. So it's like, that was even more embarrassing. That was worse than what I expected. And then just seeing Oribe Peralta, the highest paid player in our team, that has only scored like 1 goal for us, and then he's like chatting it up with his old teammates where he did win things, like, and it's like, it's so embarrassing on our side, I think, particularly. And again, if Chivas had won, and if Chivas had this dominance over America over the last 3 years, then maybe I wouldn't mind it as much. But I think you have to have, as a player, you have to have some sort of tact, some sort of logic in your mind that tells you, hey, we just lost. The cameras could potentially be recording us. The fans will not like this type of interaction. Let's go to the tunnel. Like, let's just go to it's just logical. So I understand that it's a bit silly to be mad about this, but it also makes sense that it's not something that you want to see. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think you're right that a lot of this has to fall under the process of context. Now, I know that there's a lot of Americanistas like you and I, Dylan, that are kind of more nonchalant about this, but there are other more kind of passionate people out there that's saying that this should have never happened. I mean, look, perfect example. We're talking about club legends. Moises Munoz said that it's basically one of the commandments in the institution to never swap a jersey with a Chivas player. So I mean, that's a player that wants stuff with America. That's a player that has hierarchy in America. For him to come out and say that, I mean, it speaks to some degree, right? I mean, at the end of the day, like I mentioned to you, it's all going to fall down to personal opinion and personal beliefs. But I mean, if you sit here and you tell me, and I'm pretty sure Rigo might agree with me, and because I think it really just falls down on like the fan base and really how old you are and how long you've been a fan of this. But I think me and Rigo can both agree in this aspect that if it was me or him, I don't think we would ever put ourselves in a situation, even if we're friends, to even swap a jersey, because I think we respect that rivalry and we know we were friends. We don't really need the jersey swapping to institute that into what we already know. So I mean, at the end of the day, you look at some of these players, they're not your traditional older players that you saw back in like the early 2000s, or you're talking about the 90s, 80s. Of course, that back then would have never have ever occurred. So I really do think it falls in the premise of how old you are and how long have you been really as a fan following this team, and how much that institution is driven into your own culture. So I think it really varies.
And now I kind of bring the question to both of y'all too, and whoever wants to go first on this one. But is this kind of a change in the times now? I mean, because Rigo, like you said it yourself. Chivas hasn't beat America in 3 years. You haven't seen Ligia in 3 years, and it just kind of seems like, almost every year, this Clasico, like the hype for it has kind of died down a little bit. So should this Clasico even be respected, as much as it has been, back in, the 2000s and 90s? Hell, even friendlies sometimes here in the States, get rowdy. So, is it just a change of times now, or what are we looking at going forward now after this?
I'll let Rigo go, and then I'll piggyback off whatever he says.
I think that, okay, yeah. I think that, like, if you would have said that to me even a year ago, like, has this rivalry lost its touch or its meaning, I would have probably gotten offended. But I'm done like defending these players and Chivas as a club, because I've waited for them to respond to that type of statement for a long time. But I realize now it does seem like the Clasico has been watered down over the years, and that's all on Chivas. That's all on Chivas because year in, year out, they make the same mistakes. They let go of players that they're not supposed to. They don't fill the spots that are needed. They hire players that aren't really going to help or contribute in any way. Nobody expects anything from Oribe Peralta, for example. Why would you sign a 36-year-old player directly from your rival when they didn't even want him anymore? They didn't even want him anymore. And it's in a position where we're saturated. Like, we have enough strikers. And then there's countless examples, like Molina. I don't know if you guys noticed, but during the entire game, he couldn't receive and control a single ball. His passes were terrible, as they have been all season. And it's just given the context of what that game meant. This last game on Saturday, what it meant. It was our last chance to make this rivalry interesting again, because we would have been within 2 points of America, but they really didn't even seize the opportunity, or they didn't even give a good effort. So I'm just devastated, and I'm done defending these players. And so, yeah, I think that the rivalry has lost a lot of meaning for the players themselves, not for me. I still want to be America. I still feel the same towards America, but it doesn't look like the players are representing that.
Yeah, I think I agree with Rigo, and that's really the saddest thing about this whole discussion is that the Clasico has, in the way that Rigo put it, has been watered down, and I think you've seen it over the years. And I don't know if it's 100% credit to Chivas not being as competitive, but I remember a time in where America were at the lowest of the lowest. When that famous era that me and you don't always joke about with Ruben Romano at the helm of things. When America was just not winning anything, you went into the Clásico and you knew that Chivas had our number for quite some time, and then of course Piojo Herrera comes and things start changing up after that. But I think even back then the rivalry still held a very special competitive hierarchy among every other game in the regular season, and you see it now, and it has dwindled from that time where it was the one game. It was the game of the season. You lost that game, and it was pretty much lights out for the rest of the season. Because Liguilla is a whole different thing. But once you talk about the regular season, if you didn't win that game, then it was pretty much a failure. So, and then that's pretty much it. Because I've seen. And I'll put a perfect example. My own cousin, at one point, he was telling me, he's like, at this point, I'm not even worried about playing Chivas. I really just want to beat the Monterrey teams, Monterrey and Tigres, because at this point, it seems like they're kind of like the rivals to beat. But I'm one of the few, just like Rigo, who still hold dear and near the Clásico to their heart, because that really is the culture of Liga MX. It's the game that should speak for our league, and it's the two biggest clubs in Mexico. And I would dare to say the two biggest teams in North America. So it's just it is sad, and I don't know what's gonna bring it back up. It might just have to be that Chivas, has to be a little bit more competitive. But I think they're still in a very good fighting position. I could see them, going into the Liga, but I mean, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, it is a little bit of striking position that we're in. That now we're talking about a Clásico that isn't even what it used to be back then.
Yeah, no, I understand both y'all's points. So, kind of like dwindling down here a little bit. Players swap jerseys. So I guess in a sense, what does that put on the club? You kind of talked about the rivalry a little bit now. In terms of this rivalry, one of like the rivalry in North America, heck, even probably across the Americas. So kind of how does it now affecting the club going forward now with these two clubs? Because like these were the clubs in Mexico, but now it just kind of seems like it's the spark's not there anymore. So how does that taint the institutions at any of all?
I think you have to look at who's running the club, who's making the decisions for America. And I would really applaud them if they went and they sat down with those players that were involved and said, we're not here to tell you how to be or who to be friends with and how to go about your friendship. But you have to remember that you uphold an institution and that those are our biggest rivals, that you should not be doing that in a public eye. Do it in the locker room. Trust me, I've been behind the scenes of the Azteca. There's plenty of space in where they could have taken care of this without no one ever being able to look at what happened. So, I mean, it's really going to fall down on on what America is doing. And I'm be 100% honest with you, and I don't think that they're even going to bat an eye on this whatsoever. And that's the sad part. That really is the sad part. But I mean, it's the times we're in, right? It's the times. It's how America's run. There isn't anyone that is running the institution that came up, that knows it, that really feels the colors that previous people have. So I mean, I don't know. I'm curious what Rigo thinks.
Yeah, like I agree, and it's really about. And there are countless situations that these players have gone through that it's like you question yourself as to like, what are they telling these players? Why are they not coached or like mentored in the right way? Like, how are they doing these things that lack any sort of logic? Obviously, I think it's pretty obvious that you shouldn't be doing that after losing a game, for example. You shouldn't be. That's kind of like obvious. It's also obvious not to post a video of yourself drinking onto Instagram, but Chivas players lack any sort of common sense, right? So I think, and a friend of mine that his name is Danny, and we do a podcast together specifically about Chivas, and he said that if he were in charge of Chivas, he would put these problem players, these players that have repeatedly done dumb things, he would put a coach, like a what's it called, like a life coach for each player, because it seems like these players don't know what it is to be part of these huge institutions, right? Chivas, it demands a lot from you. Even after the game, you have to be a Chivas player 24/7. And in some of these other teams, it's not like that, like you don't have that sort of spotlight on you all the time. So I do think that they need some guidance in that regard. And really, the only thing that's going to change the Clásico is Chivas getting their stuff right for once. But that's going to take a lot of work, because since we don't have such a large pool of players, some people view that as a handicap. But if you're smart, you can cope with that, and you can recruit the best youth, and you can coach them the best way, and you can constantly try to advance your players with new strategies, new methodology that's coming out, like new tactics, statistics, and try to be at the forefront of that so that you have some sort of edge. But Chivas seems uninterested in that. So that's why every year we see it. America fans aren't really afraid of Chivas. Some of them are starting to not even care about this game. And that's really a clear indicator of what the trend is.
Right. Definitely agree. So Rigo, for you, you talked about how, Chivas got to get their stuff together, you talked about some things, that could potentially get them on the right track, but would kind of in a way like reteaching what the institution is, what it means to you and Chivistas, like does reteaching that to these players, getting them to feel the colors of that they wear week in and week out, is that something too that you would want to see the club do to prevent something like this that happens in the public eye?
Yeah, like if you come to Chivas as a player and you find a team that's not competitive, that doesn't score a lot of goals, that doesn't play an attractive brand of football, it's very hard for you to begin to feel identified with this team and with the history of this team. So I think that's the main thing that we need to focus on, is fixing the sporting aspect of it, And then I feel like a lot of this, because like you're not going to feel the rivalry if one of the teams is always winning and the other is always losing. You're not going to feel any rivalry there. So unless, because we're not from the same city, you know what I mean? If it were from the same city, then maybe there would still be this kind of, big rivalry, even if one team is doing very poorly and the other team is doing well. But since I think we're not even in the same city and Chivas aren't competing at that level, I think it's very hard for these players. Like, you can talk to them all you want about the history of the great clashes that America and Chivas had, but they're not living it. They're not doing it every day. So it's really, like, they probably don't even feel it anymore.
Ivan, you got anything to kind of piggyback off that, or in terms of maybe for America players that are coming up, we've talked about it before. We see some of these players play, they just don't necessarily feel the colors of the jersey. Is that something maybe that America needs to do in their institution?
Yeah, and the one thing that does worry me about this whole kind of youth development change from having Alfredo Tena to now this European guy that came in from Villarreal is who's going to be in charge of instilling that history, that kind of culture, that kind of definition of what America should be. Because you had a historic player like Alfredo Tena, right, the captain who will always be the captain of America, kind of teach these youngsters how it goes about it. And then now you're kind of switching transitions into what this new era of kind of youth development is going to be for America in regards to being more on the whatever he's bringing to the table. So it does worry me a little bit because, like Rigo said, yeah, I think the longer we delay this, it's probably looking 10, 15 years from now where a Clasico is completely watered down and it's just another game in the books, and that's not what you kind of want to see. And I think we all always, and I think we want to experience the Clásicos that the prior generation experienced, back in the 90s and the 80s, and I'm sure we want our kids to experience those kind of Clásicos as well for the upcoming future. And if we keep going down this road, it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. And of course, I mean, the benefits of having people coming through the ranks and knowing what the jersey means and really playing for the love of the club, it just means you're going to get better players, really. So, someone who's willing to go out there, run and die for the colors and for the institution, quote unquote, would, is someone that's going to give you 110%, exactly what you always want on the pitch. So it is interesting to see what happens, but I do agree with Rigo that, things have to change, I think, on both ends in order for this to transcend, and so that we don't have to sit here and talk about a jersey swap anymore, because then the players would understand, as good of a friend as you may be, there's boundaries and there's lines, and this is my job and this is my institution, this is what I live for, so I'm not going to cross those boundaries. But again, we're living in different times where it's different now. It's maybe not looked too down upon. Others will say that it is, but I think at the end of the day, it just falls down onto how you really look at it.
Right. No, definitely agree with you, Ivan. But guys, I'll kind of leave you with this last question. Rigo, I know you kind of mentioned a lot of things, for Chivas to get back on track and finally get a win against America. And Ivan, you kind of are questioning, this European guy coming in with the youth academy, if he's going to distill this history. And Rigo, I know you're looking at the same thing too, but for Chivas. But is there any hope in the future that this Clasico can be revived to what it once was?
I'll go. Yes, I believe there is. And I think the few people that still hold dear and near this Clasico to their heart, will make it so that it stays that way. And when I'm not just talking about the fans, but I think there's people in that institution that still hold this rivalry to a high pedigree. So, I mean, it's going to be up to them, but I think there's a lot of work to be done on both ends, but I think that I think it's possible.
All right. Looks like we might have lost Rigo there. Yeah, we did lose him. Oops. So Rigo was experiencing some technical difficulties and left the call and couldn't rejoin us due to those difficulties. So we went ahead and sent him a message over on Twitter asking him if he thinks the Clasico can be revived to what it once was, and I haven't got the answer from him. So here's what he had to say.
Alrighty, so Rigo said, I think there is hope, but it really depends on Chivas. I think we need to make a lot of structural changes before we can go to that level. The fan base still has the passion, but the players, specifically Chivas, aren't representing us the way they should. So that is Rigo's answer. Interesting stuff, man.
Yeah, no, definitely do. I kind of do wish, we kind of get back there a little bit. Obviously, I say it a lot too. Being a Medica fan since about 2012. I never really got to experience that full Clasico. I feel like especially whenever you go back to like the 2000s and then the 90s. Some of those fans growing up actually seeing these two teams go at it. So I kind of want to experience that and a bit more, and hopefully we can get to that level again.
Yeah, it'd be interesting, and I really do hope that we can go back to those kind of epic times and where the Clasico meant everything. Like it really was bragging rights. I mean, at this point, I think people may still clown on a Chivas fan, but I don't think it's going to be as severe as I remember growing up as a kid. Hating whenever America lost to Chivas because the week would just be torment at school. So, I mean, I don't know what it is now, but I don't think it's to the same level. So, we'll have to wait and see, but fingers crossed that we can get there.
Right, I definitely agree. And Ivan, that pretty much wraps it up here, but is there any final thoughts, anything you want to say that we can get to talk about?
I do want to ask you a question, and I really wish Rigo was here so that I could ask him this as well. But if you were to put yourself in Cordoba's shoes, if you were to put yourself in the players that were in there, if you were playing for America, knowing the passion and the love that you have for the club, and let's say your bestest of friends, your best mate in the world was playing for the rival team for Chivas, would you swap jerseys with him? Yes or no?
I think like how Rigo put it, and you put it too. I think there's a time and place for it. Maybe if we would have gone back under the tunnel, where not many people are there, then I think so. Because, at the end of the day, that's my friend, I'd probably even sign for him. I'll be honest with you. But, at least I know, in a sense, there's a time and place to do that. And, despite them not being fans, there's still people there on the pitch, potentially, journalists that could, catch that. And then, obviously we see what it stirred up. But the time and place for it. So, I mean, yeah, but not in the public like that, with everybody around watching like that.
Interesting. Like I mentioned, at the end of the day, it goes down to personal preference. Would I ever do it? Probably not. I mean, you could be my best friend, but there's something in me that says I can't. But at the end of the day, it's personal preference. Is there a right or wrong answer? Probably not.
I wouldn't say I would put it around my neck like Cordova did. I mean, I just think, if you have the chance, to play with the institution, especially the way that the team is, internationally per se, whether it was going to like the Club World Cup or, just playing Coco Champions, there's no telling where you can get other jerseys from. But again, I think there's a time and place.
Yeah, there definitely is. Definitely is.
Well, I mean, Ivan, that pretty much wraps it up. I wish Rigo was here. I can give him a little platform to tell people he could tell people where they can find him on Twitter. But maybe we'll just insert that in the description below. But Ivan, people know where to find you, and I hope they really don't. But that's just where we are. But Ivan, thanks for coming on. I really do appreciate it.
No, thank you so much for hosting, and may I say that this was a very, very fun and interesting thing to do, and I do hope people enjoyed the conversations, and if they did and want to see more of it, I hope they let us know in the comment section down below. Like and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and thanks for everything, man.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you all for watching and listening. We'll catch you all on the flip side.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was another production of the Eagle Eye Podcast, the #1 source for all things Club America in English. Make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Eagle Eye Podcast and get all the latest news and coverage. And subscribe to our podcast wherever it is you may listen.